Good afternoon.
No, I'm not a professor. I'm a food writer.
My name is Marvin Taylor. I'm the director of the Fales Library, and I'd like to welcome you to this afternoon's critical topics in food studies. Each year, we plan 3 programs like this, current topics of interest to people involved in all aspects of food. And today's topic is cooks who grow their own, more direct route from earth to table. And let me stop. Please turn off your cell phones. Thank you. The Fales collection began 5 years ago to document American foodways, especially what happened in New York after the Second World War. We have an amazing program here in food studies. It's the Department of Nutrition, Food Studies, and Public Health, one of the first in the country that really looked at food in a very serious way. And Marian came to me and said, we need materials to help support the research of students. I'm happy to say that today we have over 20,000 cookbooks in the collection. And I'd like to also point out that Dalia Carmel is here today, who donated 8,500 cookbooks from all over the world to us. We're about halfway through processing her collection. So we built a resource that's not only available to students and scholars here at NYU, but also to people in the food industry here in New York, because there wasn't really quite a collection like this that was accessible. We could not have done this, however, without the help of the department and many generous friends. And perhaps no one's been more generous than Clark Wolf, who helps organize these programs and is in general our best cheerleader for food studies at NYU. So I'm going to shut up and introduce Clark. And Clark, thank you again, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Please turn your phones back on, but just to vibrate. I'm teasing. Thank you for coming out on a wet day. This is a critical topic. You know that our goal is always to leave everyone feeling as if there could be a week conference, 4-year master's program, life learning treatise that could end up a book, a movie, and a television something, reality TV show. Is that a dog? No, it's a cat. It's a cat. Oh, good. All right. Is there an animal here? Oh, all right, never mind. It's an interesting cell phone. So today will be the 3rd of this year's collection. And actually, every year we plan 3. Every year, it's only been 3 years. And each year, something comes up that we are compelled to address. So this year, we were asked to add, and actually had SRO in the 3rd week of July, a discussion about the Farm Bill. The Farm Bill has not been completed, as you may have read somewhere. And so today's topic is as relevant to this discussion. And as a matter of fact, if you have your senator's email on speed dial, please use it during the entire day. Because the way we eat and the way we live really is greatly affected by something called the Farm Bill that we have almost no knowledge of, or certainly didn't until earlier this year as a general public, and very little control over. It's a long discussion. It's a big one. Today, there was a wonderful piece in the New York Times about how Japan is doing a very good job of checking the ingredients of food that comes from China. Apparently, 60% of their food comes from China because they're kind of a cute, small little island. And in the midst of this, we're trying to learn about that. But it brings to light the notion that food can come from a lot of places. And in Japan, the choices cannot turn to growing out back. Whereas in New York, we're reading stories about people raising chickens out back or out front in Brooklyn, in Oakland, in Atlanta, in Austin, and every day there are new developments. When I first came to New York in 1982, if you wanted a piece of really fresh, perfectly grilled fish and a brilliant little salad, you went to the grill room at the Four Seasons and it was $160. All right? The first job of a chef in the early 1980s, I think those of us who have been involved with this will tell you, the first job was to get something good to cook. And if you were that person, sometimes called Larry Forgione, you didn't tell anyone where you got it because there wasn't enough of it to go around to all the different restaurants. So you put the name of the farm, but you misspelled it and you never gave them the email or the phone number. Everybody thought Alice Waters was kind of wacky. Turns out she was kind of wacky and kind of right. Alice was originally scheduled to be here today, but she's written a book, her book finally. She's collaborated on a lot with other people, but she's written a book called The Art of Simple Cooking. Is that right? Did I get that right? Yes, thank you, Dahlia. Dahlia knows from books. And yesterday, as we were running around the farmers market, and I have to tell you, over the last 3 years, we have been pleased to avail ourselves of the budget for the library. And so usually the reception following is budgeted at about $1,000, $1,200. And it's catered, we hope, by somebody interesting, somebody good, somebody local, somebody who went to school here maybe. Well, the last couple of times, Tosca and I have decided to go to the green market. What a concept. And last time for $150, it was July. And this time for $220, it's October. What you enjoy later will entirely come from the green market at Union Square. And when we were there yesterday, under a little green tent, sitting at a table, signing books, was Alice Waters. And I thought, this is a person who puts her pen in her backside where her mouth is. There she was sitting and chatting with people and talking about the importance of a good tomato, which you will have later. A lot has changed in the last 20 years, 20-something years, since I've been in New York. And I'm reminded immediately of a chef in Seattle who got a lot of attention recently for buying his own farm. His name is Tom Douglas. Anybody been to Seattle? It rains kind of like this, only it's colder. And he has been a very successful multi-restaurateur. He's got a bunch of restaurants, I think it's what it's called. And he was getting a lot of press because he was now announcing that he had his own farm. It was supplying all of his restaurants. So I saw him not long ago and I said, Tom, why'd you do it? Tell us the big story. And he said, my in-laws forgot to develop a retirement plan. And so I put them at a farm. And now because I have these restaurants, it's viable. Yes, right, not buying the farm, calm down. But it was so interesting that it was a retirement plan option as opposed to some clever gimmick to make the restaurant special. Today we have 4 people who know a lot about these topics. Chefs who grow their own, which used to mean, or cooks who grow their own, which used to mean something else on the windowsill. I learned when I moved to New York also that it's okay to eat basil that's grown at home in Manhattan as long as it's grown above the 4th floor. Is that great? Lead poisoning or something. Anyway. But other things can grow at ground level. And over these times, over the years, our first speaker has been covering this topic from a lot of different aspects. This is the person who let us know that not all of that wild salmon was with a capital W. Let us know that perhaps the organic standards were going to be examined before they were approved and accepted. Let us know that maybe just because a grocery store is famous doesn't mean you can eat there or any of their food. Marian Burros is somebody whose byline we trust. She has as much fun as having things come to her home by mail order and torturing her friends with tasting all of them, as she does with making sure that she protects us when she finds that foods that we're being offered are not as they are sold. So please, first of all, welcome Marian Burros. Marian, what I'd like you to talk about is, as a reporter for the New York Times, you have been covering these things for a long time. And sometimes it's a lovely story about a farm and a guy with in a little Washington, and he goes out barefoot and he dances around and he picks a tomato. Right? And it's good if we can make her laugh. It's good. It's good. And sometimes it's what I now refer to as farm wash. You know, green wash, farm wash, kind of phony, right? Hey, let's all put on a farm because that's the popular thing now. So over the years, first of all, talk to us a little bit about how things have changed and how you look at those things and how you characterize them or categorize them.
Well, you already used the word I was going to use, so I really have very little left to say. Before coming here today, I was emailing with someone who is here in the audience, and I said, so tell me, how far does the history of, getting it yourself and cooking it go that has nothing to do with people who've always lived on the land? And she said, well, in one book I was reading, it talks about how an army marches on its stomach, and when Napoleon went to war and was going to stay in a place any length of time, they brought all the equipment they had to, and then they went out and they foraged. I think maybe foraging in that case meant stealing, but never mind. The point was that they took what was local. More recently, somebody who was supposed to be on the panel, and I'm sorry he isn't because he has a wealth of knowledge and information, Gus Schumacher, who was an Undersecretary of Agriculture in the Clinton administration. Before that, in between other jobs, and comes from a farm family, as a matter of fact, his father used to have a farm stand at 72nd Street and Broadway, even though the family is from the Boston area. In the 1970s, I met him in Boston because he was the Commissioner of Agriculture for the state of Massachusetts. And what was he doing? He was putting farmers together with restaurateurs. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that this was before anybody else ever did it, but he certainly made a very big splash with it. And it was such a good story that I wrote it for where was I working then? I don't know, Washington Star, a newspaper that no longer exists. And he continued to do that, and a lot of other people got that idea, as you know. And for his 25th reunion from college, which was at Harvard, he got all of these farmers to bring the food in for lunch for his classmates in the football field at Harvard, Soldiers Field, and they'd never seen anything like it, nor had the farmers for that matter. Because one problem with most farmers is they really like to farm, they don't want to talk with people generally, they don't want to have to merchandise their stuff, but they're learning. Gus was the first one that I'm aware of who did this directly. But when you think about the markets that are all over, Pike Place Market in Seattle or our green markets here, that's where the chefs started to go. And the chefs were going there, so everybody else thought, boy, this must be a really good idea. And from that came the chefs finding their own suppliers, like Larry Forgione, and not telling anybody about it. In a way, that's still true because a lot of these farmers simply cannot produce enough for a whole bunch of restaurants. And we've all thought that this was a really rather grand idea and have taken it on ourselves. Farmers markets are proliferating at the most incredible rate all over the country, even places where you didn't know they grew anything, but something like thousands of acres of wheat. From there, artisanal products just seemed like a hop, skip, and a jump away. Well, how come we didn't think of this before? We started with European artisanal products, and then we found our own. And one of the things that I'm lucky enough to do every year is do a mail order story for the holidays, in which I try to get, at one point I would get European things, but they're very hard to import anyway. But now it's so easy to find wonderful local things. And when I say local in this case, I have to mean the United States because the papers read all over. But the cheeses, to me, is one of the best, most fabulous examples of farm product and chefs going gangbusters with all kinds of cheeses. We even have Restauranteur that is known specifically for its cheese. And these people have made cheese, American cheese. I'm not going to get carried away and say it's as good as European cheese, but it's as good as many, many European cheeses. Eberhard Mueller, who once was a very well-known restaurateur here and very highly regarded, has given it up to become a farmer. And now he's producing the things for other restaurants and for regular ordinary folks like us out on Long Island. And they're sort of exquisite because he knows exactly what he wants and what he wants to sell and what he thinks tastes good. And right down at the end of the table here, we have a fellow who has not only a restaurant, but he has his very own farm right next door to the restaurant at Blue Hill at Stone Barns. And if you've never, maybe I'll do a little commercial for you. Not that you need one, you don't. If you want to see your eggs dropping, you want to see your carrots coming up out of the ground, those little tiny carrots, that's the place to go. And then eat the food. It's incredible. So what has happened?
Marian, I've never heard you say that.
It's on tape. You can sell it.
But it's not in the paper.
Whoa! Don't mess with it.
I'm not a restaurant reviewer anymore. But don't think that everything that comes from a farm is necessarily good, or that every restaurant that makes all these claims is necessarily good. And I'm going to be sort of mean and mention one that I find that has not succeeded. It's extremely successful, don't misunderstand me, but it's almost like farm wash. There's a place called the Farmer's Diner up in Vermont, now in Quechee. It used to be in Barre. And I was there 6 weeks ago in its new location. And they are selling farm, and the stuff is from local farms. But they can't cook. So things don't really taste that good. They ought to, but they don't. So you still need a really good chef. Maybe he doesn't have to fuss as much anymore, but he certainly has to know how to cook. I want to quote to you from a book I wrote a couple of years ago because I think that's what's really happening in this country on a grander scale. As consumers, we've gone, came out in 2003. As consumers, we've gone from coveting food from abroad to coveting food from local farmers. Today in the culinary world, the phrase locally grown has high standing on menus as fancy ingredients like foie gras and truffles. We want artisanal food, not corporate ingredients. We want meat that is organic and grass-fed, not stockyard raised or bioengineered. In fact, in some ways, we have come to a point where the quality of ingredients is more important than any fussing done with them. These two directions, on the one hand, a desire to return to the satisfying family-based meals of America's past, and on the other hand, the desire to eat healthy, family, farm-based ingredients have led to the reappearance of what has commonly come to be called comfort food. I don't think it is anymore, but 4 years ago it was. We are embracing dishes particular to America, reinterpreting them in some instances, leaving them as they stand in others. It's the process of a natural cycle. But something has happened in the last couple of years that's made this business of local even more important, and Clark hinted at it. If Japan has figured out how to look at all the ingredients from China, people are really worried about their food. They're scared of what they're buying from abroad. And so whatever impetus there was to eat local, for chefs to buy local food and serve it, has increased exponentially, far more than it ever might have otherwise. But just the way that people want to know where their toys are from and where their food for their dogs and cats is from, they certainly want to know where their food is from. And I do know people, and I've heard people who are in the business say, if it says China on it, they won't buy it anymore. So they have a real public relations problem. So I think that this is only going to mean that there's going to be more and more local food available. And if the big thing that needs yet to be done for the chefs, for all of us, is they need to have an infrastructure in the locale. All of the processing plants, all of the slaughterhouses are gone. They're all now centralized. And people who want to bring their small numbers of hogs to market and sell them locally have much more trouble. Even the same is true with their fruits and vegetables. There's some movement on all these fronts, but it's going to take quite a while. And I will make one further comment because it has to do with the Farm Bill. Or it was supposed to be the Farm and Food Bill, but believe me, it's still the Farm Bill. And don't hold out much. I wouldn't bother calling my senators because it's not going to do any good. You'd come from the wrong state. They've made a few small changes that may be a little bit helpful to farmers, but and they're giving a little bit of money to the specialty crop growers like the people who raise fruits and vegetables. But most of the things that do us absolutely no good, like what's called Title I, the subsidies, are there as strong or stronger than ever. So until all of that changes, the kinds of money you need to get the little infrastructure, local infrastructure, not going to happen very readily. And it's sort of up to all of us to keep buying from the farmers, keep helping them in whatever ways they can. And that's the only way that we'll ever get local agriculture for everybody. This is not exactly how I meant to bring this to a conclusion, but because of what you said, it made me think of it. And I hope this wasn't too boring and overlooked.
No. I think that what we hope is that you'll all keep making good food and sending it to Marian so she can write about it so people will buy it so it'll be out there, right? Thank you. And actually, I have to say that going to the farmer's market yesterday, I was struck by how, first of all, Cato Corner, which used to be okay, is making exquisite cheeses. Suddenly they've jumped up 3 levels in every new cheese, right? And I had 2 more. One is a Gouda, another one is kind of like a rinded Caerphilly. And the fellow said, I don't know what it is, it's old. Swear to God. But they're exquisite cheeses. They're really exquisite cheeses, and first time out that I've ever tasted them, suddenly, as opposed to going through the farmer's market and tasting 9 cheeses and, liking one and hoping that they make it better next time. There is exponential improvement. Speaking of all things good food, Joe Bastianich is a restaurateur. He knows a lot about wine. He is a business person who's in partnership with some kind of good cooks. One of them's named Mario something, and the other one's named Lydia something. Same something, actually. And so Joe's position, and what I want him to talk about today, is really as a passionate winemaker and a collaborator with chefs. Please help me welcome Joe Bastianich. So, Joe, tell us a little bit about the role. First of all, how you got involved in wine and olive oil, and second of all, how this all works in your familial business that I understand is vaguely Italian.
I think that the first thing that's really interesting about this is that perhaps, and this may be a different way of looking at it, wine is an agricultural product. And I think that a lot of people kind of lose sight of that because wine has so much marketing appeal, it has so much ethnicity driven to it, there's so much packaging involved with it. And I think that at its most fundamental level, drinking a glass of wine is an agricultural act, no different than eating at Dan's restaurant or eating those cheeses you just mentioned. And I think that sometimes we lose sight of that. And for me, to be able to participate in the cycle of the vine and to really kind of bring my family to that, and to really kind of it's the life cycle of the vine, and the process of making wine is one of the things in this world is truly greater than we are. And in a world of ultimate immediacy where everything is so hand to mouth and we are in control of our entire environments, being involved in the process of winemaking and being involved in the life cycle of the vine is truly humbling, an education in humility, and also an education in kind of putting you in your place in this world. And really, when we grow grapes, the results sometimes are positive, sometimes are negative. Obviously, just like all other kind of farming, we have very, very serious effects of Mother Nature, of weather, of climate. But I think that it is something that is transgenerational. It's a process and a fulfillment to me to be involved in making a product that so, in my case, directly represents the terroir of my heritage, and of making wines like my father drank, and like his father drank, and like his father before him drank, and hopefully my kids will drink, is a very unique and special privilege that we have as a family. And to be linked to this terroir is something that's really specific. Now, I'll give you a little bit of the backgrounds. I mean, in the restaurants, wine is obviously an intricate part of what we do. I kind of fell in love with wine. I've always kind of grown up with wine in the house and drinking wine, but I lived in Italy after college in the late 80s and early 90s and worked in wineries, and kind of really became in love in the process of making wine, and met inspirational people, winemakers mostly, who kind of gave me clarity in my life as to what I needed to do. And I knew I needed to, aside from being in the food business, I knew I needed to participate in this process of winemaking for a lot of reasons. And when you have those epiphanies, it's whether you in my case, it was sitting in a garage with a Barolo maker named Luciano Sandrone, having a glass of Barolo and eating a piece of Castelmagno. And it just kind of all came to me. I kind of realized that this is what it's all about. And it's like, it was illumination. And those things are very powerful. And from that moment on, I knew in my life that that's what I had to do. And I consider that it's lucky when your vision is so clear of like what you need to spend your life doing. Now, of course, between that moment of vision and where we are today, there's a couple of restaurants and partnerships and different things that we do. And I think the title of this is Chefs Who Grow Their Own. So I was thinking, well, why am I here? First of all, and then I was thinking, well, of course. I mean, as a winemaker, it is. We are growing our own now. Certainly, there's no lack of wines in the world that we could go out and buy. But I think that through these wineries, and the wineries, there's two of them. One is in Friuli Venezia Giulia, which is near the city of Trieste, which is kind of where our ancestry is located too, and that's eponymous. The name is Bastianich, as wineries in that area are. People don't name their wineries after a name. Generally, the wineries are named after the people who own them. And then subsequent to that, we have another project in southern Tuscany in an area called the Maremma, which is kind of like around Grosseto, about 100 kilometers north of Rome. If you land at Fiumicino and you get on the Aurelia, which is the old Roman road going up towards Firenze, you'll run. It's on the coast. where we make Sangiovese-based wines. The DOC is called Morellino di Scansano. But I think that it's when you look and you're able in the restaurants to kind of present a wine and your food and create that kind of moment of pairing food and wines, of the sensibility. Now, we're lucky enough in our restaurants mostly to work within the vernacular of Italian food and wine, which I consider to be a real blessing and a fortune, because it's powerful. People love all things Italian. And I think that the sensibility and comfort that people get from the Italian food and wine experience is unparalleled. So we consider that a fortune or a blessing to work within that. And to be able to present wines that you make in a setting where in your restaurant, where you're serving your food, is a very unique and a special privilege for me, because there's not many scenarios where you can control the ultimate experience in such an immediate and powerful way, and in our way, I think that's how we're able to create a little bit of magic. And what we do is at that table, when that food experience and wine experience is really right, and it all comes together for you, maybe other people have that moment of luminosity, of vision that overtakes them with that, like that food can be. It's very powerful. It's very personal, and wine is very much also, on the other hand, a business. And I think that perhaps that's where wine suffers, as opposed to our regional farmers, who I think kind of are able to carry more of our sympathy, and because I don't think there's a lot of people making a whole lot of money farming that I know of. Dan? No, well, he's there, but
We'll get Dan a sandwich later on. It'll be okay.
But I think that winemakers suffer a little bit, or the industry as a whole, because historically there is a lot of glitz associated with the terroirs of the world, are often considered to be glamorous, whether it be French wines or Barolo or wines of Napa Valley in California. But I think, as evidenced as the trends in wines that we see today, that wine at its most pure and perfect incarnation is simply it's the fruit of the vine, and there's not really much that has to happen to it. It's the act of fermentation, which is we take sugar, which grows in the grapes naturally, we turn it into alcohol. The wines are bottled. There's not really any chemical or intervention otherwise that needs to happen in the winemaking process. So it is the most natural thing in the world to grow grapes and turn it into wine. And wine is the oldest beverage known to man. I mean, it's the first thing we drank after water was wine. And
And Joe, we're going to ask you in a little while to comment about how it relates in your whole group of restaurants to other things made of pork, for example. But it's very interesting. You bring your heritage, you bring your whole history, and you bring your own personal farming, and you do address the financial issue and the fact that you have a little magic in a bottle. But your notion of the humility is really kind of important. How does it differ when you're offering these personally made wines in a rather grand context at times, next to other wines that have great marketing, great glamour, great glitz?
I think that our wines, at least the wines that I make, are a very, very personal expression of what I feel a wine needs to be, and the way I think about wine at the table, and wine and food together. So I'm lucky because of we are able to sustain a lot of our own production. So we really are not we don't have to be in the business. We always say we sell the wine because we can't drink it all. And that's a good position.
You're
to be
just not
in.
trying.
No, we try really hard.
Okay.
Me and my partner, but it's good to be in a position where you can make kind of an uncompromised product and just do what you really think is right and love, and you don't have to worry about the marketing so much. And we've been lucky enough that our wines are global brands to a certain extent and sold all over the world, but they are what they are.
We're going to get to more of the details. And by the way, you have been given some cards, some 3x5 cards. Did they get passed out? We will let you send up these questions. Wait to hear everybody so that we can ask some of your questions as well, because I know that there'll be things that are raised in the course of the moment, and I'll clean them up if I need to ask people questions. But let's go on to another farmer, if I may. This one happens to write. He happens to be a fourth generation Norwegian farm family kind of fella. who has been covering food as a writer and as a cook, as a chef in Norway, but also now, after traveling the world, has written some books and done some PBS television and has got a new book out, which, by the way, along with Joe's book about wine, is available after from the bookstore about his foods. Please welcome from actually a South African empowerment farm, Andreas Viestad. Please welcome. All right. Andreas, I've pretty quickly confused everyone, okay? But by the same token, what you said to me the other night at dinner was quite interesting to me. He said something like, and I'll let him correct it, my purpose in having a farm is to grow the food, cook it, and eat it. What a great idea, right? But by the same token, as we all do things in our lives, in our personal and professional lives, we do things to fuel our intellect, to fuel our inspiration, to fuel ourselves. I mean, one of the reasons I'm involved with this is because you are all my continuing education. You know, I get to learn things every time as we're developing these programs. So what Andreas is really doing is many, many things at once. And what he started in this farm is a series of experiments and a series of relationships with people. But he started from the earth, from his family, from his wife and child, and what he wants to try to grow, and is beginning to have a relationship with people who cook. So, Andreas, tell us, correct how I've described your life, and tell us a little bit about, first of all, the farming, a little bit in your family history, and the farming and its purpose in your current life.
Well, you said I was a fourth generation Norwegian farmer. I think that there was a friend of mine who said he wanted to describe Norwegian history through his own family, and it goes like this: farmer, 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 teacher, TV host. And there's something about we don't have to go far back in order to have that association with the soil. And I'm lucky enough I've grown up in Oslo, the capital of Norway. But my father was kind of a late blooming hippie, and he managed to buy the old family farm when I was just like 2 or 3 years old. So I grew up there during the summers, and he had all kinds of idealistic projects going on. I remember dreading his beans. That he had a very unconvincing try at becoming a vegetarian. But I also remember the joy of fishing your own fish and getting your hands dirty when you're gutting it, but still actually being a kid and liking a fish, liking to eat fish, and growing your own potatoes and stuff. That was a kind of background to me. And later on, I started working. I'm not a chef. I have a journalist background. And later on, I started working on the PBS TV show that you mentioned, New Scandinavian Cooking, and we did a small thing when we were planning how to make a show. That was we knew we wanted it to be about the local ingredients and simple cooking, and to reintroduce a region that was either kind of the cliche of lutefisk, or people would not know anything about it. And what we did was we decided that instead of going out into nature and getting the ingredients and taking them back home to the kitchen, we would want to take the kitchen out into where we could find the ingredients. And that was just a small little idea on the drawing board many years ago, but it has taken control over the process of making the TV shows, and actually wanting to visit farmers who have a story to tell, not necessarily have a lot of produce to come up with. So someone who has 4 cows is much more interesting if he's living and raising his cows in a traditional way and is making his own cheese. That's much more interesting than someone who has a successful business. And from a kind of that story perspective, because we want to be out in nature, and we want them to be not so much stainless steel and much more quaint farmers and stuff. And then I think as a result of that, I more and more got the urge to become a farmer, a quaint farmer myself. And when I was finishing up my spice book, I was staying in South Africa, and I fell in love with the country. And one day I was sitting with my wife, and we at a wine farm belonging to a friend of ours, and there was a big fire, and we managed to put out the fire, and we were lucky the wind turned, and we thought, we have a connection to this land. We have a deeper connection since we and it was very quick thing. And after that, later that evening, we were still shaken by the drama of the day, but we said, let's try and see if we can have a farm here in South Africa and grow our own produce, do things hard and complicated way. And by a series of coincidences, we met a farmer and neurosurgeon, the kind of visionary guy who has a huge apple and wine farm just outside of South Africa, and we're now renting a small farm on this huge farm. And what we're doing is we're doing all the mistakes. So we had like our first growing season last year. We suddenly had things dying on us, and it was, I've never ever cried for a salad before, but there's, and then suddenly something would start growing, maybe for some reason, most of our carrots died one week, but we would have 11 carrots of these round carrots. Have you seen them? Paris-style carrots that are not the Nantes carrot, and you have the Paris carrot that they used to grow in the very hard clay soil of the region around Paris, and there was something about that, These 11, we had this feast with 11 carrots, and we planted a small orchard where we only have like 2 or 3 of each tree, but we have about 30 different types of peaches. We have 10 different types of nectarines. We have got 10 different types of figs, and we've got some ducks running around among the fig trees. And when the fig trees were small, they were just eating the leaves. Now we hope that they will eat whatever falls down on the ground, and we'll have a circle of life on the farm, and we got about 100 different types of tomatoes. And the funny thing was that even though we made a lot of mistakes, there was something about those dinners that we had towards the end of the season. And now when the trees are getting older, we will have a much longer season when we have our own produce. There was something about those dinners where we almost stopped cooking. We had a new type of tomato ripening every day, and it would be different. Some of them would be fantastic. Some of them would be kind of large and watery, but they hadn't been refrigerated. They hadn't been taken anywhere. I picked them off the vine, and I realized that they didn't. They had a lot of taste too. They had something, an ephemeral taste rather than a big taste. And you had all these kind of different levels that I didn't know existed. And I think that it's, we don't have a business plan, and we're acutely aware of that. But I think this is such a wonderful, such a rich way of wasting money. There's something about you said that you can control every part of the process, and you can that even more. I think when you can have a feast with 11 carrots and some slices of wrinkly tomatoes, it's. And I've seen that even though we haven't tried to recruit anyone, we haven't tried to market it. I brought a box of tomatoes to a friend who was a cook, who would share it with a friend who was a chef, and who would share, and people would start calling. I think that there is such a hunger for these kind of things, and I was afraid that it would be a kind of intellectual thing, that you have to know. You have to know that it's important. You have to know that part of the circle is broken. But I realized that, even when inviting people who were self-processed, not interested in food at all, they would say, and something would happen around the dinner table, something that wasn't, that they almost resisted, and that was because they'd never tasted it before.
Isn't that wonderful? Thank you, Andreas. I think we're going to send all of our fledgling food writers and PBS presenters to South Africa to farm for a little while with their own money. I love the fact that Andreas called it a wine farm. I think that was kind of wonderful. And I love that Joe talked about the process and being able to control it. It reminds me of what Meryl Streep said in Postcards from the Edge about instant gratification just taking too long. I thought that was good.
I put out a fire once in a garbage pail in the southwest
Yeah,
part
that's
of
very
Washington
good.
Park. I think I'm going to plant carrots there next summer.
And by the way, it does explain why when Andreas was on his way to the restroom, he stopped immediately at the table, grabbed a carrot, and said, "Oh, this is a good carrot. That makes 12." All right, now, a gentleman who has seen the romance and seen the business, who has seen the struggle and seen the bill at the end of the day. Dan Barber actually came from a farm. Blue Hill is a farm. It's a real place. And then it became kind of a restaurant and then became another restaurant and a farm, underwritten in a serious way by some Rockefeller people. But Dan has also, in the last few years, been at the forefront of this entire conversation. And it's been a romantic conversation. It's been a difficult conversation. It's been a challenging and exciting and what some call trend-forward conversation. And it has at times been a very interestingly practical conversation. So Dan, I'm going to give you a moment to not be on the spot at this point, because you've been on the spot almost every other time.
Yeah, I asked you for a softball.
I'm going to give you a softball. What do you think of these guys? No, from your perspective, as someone who has been doing this rather publicly, tell us a little bit about what you've just heard, and where you think we are as a culture, and what you think is beginning to hold resonance in the culture, and what you think we really need to keep opening our eyes to.
Yeah, well, I think what we've heard so far here is these two sort of parallel imperatives about this issue of food and sustainability, and that would be one starting with Marian, which is sort of the overall perspective, the sort of gestalt of this, which is where we've lost our way over the last several decades, and how people have started to recognize the connections between what they eat, and cooks like me, what they cook, and the effects they have on the way the world is used. So the last 30 years has seen a lot of environmental degradation. It's seen a lot of health issues related to food. We've seen community issues related to food. And as a chef, I'm aware of all of that and learn a lot from Marian's writings and others. But I come at it, I think, more from the fire angle, which is more of the issue of exactly how can I communicate to the diners at Blue Hill the emotion and the passion of tasting delicious food. It's quite simple, and I've been trying to do that more and more through stories, which is why I think the project at Stone Barns and Blue Hill Farm work when they work well. It's most delicious when people can know that connection. So, for example, we this week started serving this garlic that we've been curing since July. It's called a curry garlic, and a curry garlic came to us from a fifth generation Italian whose father had immigrated to the United States, and a curry is, I guess, in either a town in southern Italy or a region, and I'm not quite sure, and I have to be careful because I have a Bastianich on my right, but it was very famous in this particular town for many generations because the family kept it pure. They didn't sell it off to other families or to other distributors so that it could be sold and replicated. They sort of created this garlic by marrying 2 or 3 different types of garlic, and then only the family edict was you could only give it out either in a tomato sauce or crushed. So they kept it pure through the generations, and then the father, the however you look at it, the great-great-grandson immigrated to the United States and kept the tradition going. It was growing it in upstate New York, and would send back quite a bit of garlic to this town and to the extended family and whatnot. And then his son was given the responsibility, and at some point a few years ago, he couldn't take it anymore, I guess the pressure, and he came to us and he said, told us the story, and said, will you grow this? And with a similar edict, you cannot sell it whole, and if you're going to have people try this, it can only be in Dan's cooking or crushed when you sell it. And so we've kept to that, and so we grow about 8 different varieties of garlic, this being one that has been very successful, and it's really delicious garlic. But the response from the diners when we tell the story, and I try and tell it to everyone, especially now that we've cured it. We harvested in July and we've been drying it till now, so we're going to be serving it really through the winter. And I just roast it and serve it with some grilled bread, and it's the first thing people have when they come to the restaurant. And we try and tell this sort of quick story about the generations and how we're keeping this garlic going. And the response from the diners about this garlic is, it's like the second coming. It's as if, there's this wild exultations in the dining room about garlic. They never had garlic like this. They didn't know garlic could taste like this. And I agree, it's fantastic garlic, but it is not the greatest thing since sliced bread. And the thing that makes it, I think, so delicious is this quick little narrative that's attached to it. So I've been learning this lesson over the last couple of years, that as provocative and persuasive as the kind of stuff that Marian was talking about, what really gets people to taste things that they otherwise wouldn't taste is some kind of story, some kind of connection to the people who are growing the food they're eating, or to where it's coming from, or how it's getting to them. These kind of stories tend to get people to taste flavors that I, even on my best evenings in the kitchen, can't produce. So it's this secret ingredient. And so that's my imperative here, is to tell more stories as we move on. And so if I'm looking at sort of the future of this debate or this argument or this issue, I look at it more in terms of transparency. What chefs are not co-opting this idea, and what are they doing to bring that transparency to the diners and electrifying the constituents to influence the farm bill and influence everything in between. And then I'm also looking more and more at Stone Barns at different varieties of vegetables and different breeds of animals, which is something that if we were to project 10 years from now, I could see as one of the issues on the horizon, which is the depth of diversity for vegetables in our own ecology in the Hudson Valley, say, and the depth of the differentiation of breeds. Is severely lacking, and that's affecting not just what's offered at the farmers markets, but the quality of what's offered at the farmers market, because there's so few farmers saving seeds, and there's so few farmers naturally manipulating seeds to have varieties of vegetables be improved over the years in this ecology. So that's something we're working with very, very closely, taking breeds, identifying sows of pigs, let's say, and boars, and marrying them together to create better marbleization in the meat, to create better meat for the future. And we're doing it with varieties of vegetables that we can't have trouble getting seeds from, and even ones that we don't have trouble getting seeds from. If they're open pollinated, we're making seeds out of that to improve the varieties. And over the course of several years, it's a very long-term project. But the idea is to create better flavor. So there's these two imperatives. There's the story, which brings out all these flavors I don't think people would otherwise taste. And I repeat, even on my best days, and that's as humble as I'll get. And then the second is this reality that we can make better food through the agriculture, through improving the culture of the agriculture, and through a lot of technology, which I think is sort of this taboo subject. We talk about sustainable agriculture, and we often, with Alice in mind, I think probably try not to introduce the latest technology or innovation into farming, which I think is a huge mistake, and something that at Stone Barns we're trying hard to invest in, because the future of really good tasting food is not just heritage wisdom and local purchasing. It's also about utilizing technology, whether in the seed or in the machines that we use in the kitchen, to further those flavors and tastes, and to get people to awaken to this issue. Utilizing technology. So there's something contradictory about introducing technology into the most old school and old world wisdoms of agriculture. But I'd like to suggest that I don't think it is actually, and I think that's probably the future. So the story mixed with the reality.
All right. So, and we have a lot of questions, and they're all actually really good questions. So I'm just going to pass some of them along. A number of you, in fact, all of you write. All of you write. All of you grow fruits and vegetables of some sort, here and there. You've talked about the story, and I think I would like to start with Marian. When you evaluate some of these foods, obviously, if the food doesn't taste good, you're not going to offer it to your readers. But what role, number one, does the story play in sharing a food product? Number one, and number two, what are your general feelings and thoughts about all these farmers taking up the pen?
Well, I want to know. You have to be more specific. Are you talking about when I'm recommending it as a mail order, or I'm doing a story about
either
it?
one? If you're either recommending something as a mail order or writing a story, what are your criteria besides the fact that somewhere it's got to taste good, or maybe if you're just writing a story, you might want to focus on something that's interesting but tastes bad. Do you do that?
Well, when I'm writing for my mail order story, since I have that much space and I have to put the address and the price and shipping and what credit cards they take, it doesn't make any difference how fabulous the story is. Although sometimes I think it would make a big difference, because I know some of these stories, and these are small people and they have wonderful stories to tell. And periodically I'll get somebody to come up to me, as they did last week when I was in Brattleboro on a panel, saying, do you know that your column for holidays brings us about $40,000 a year more than we would ever have otherwise? Mm. Well, of course, that makes me feel wonderful. It's not me, it's the New York Times. I never forget that. But there's no room for those stories like that in there. However, I'm only interested in, I don't care how delicious or fabulous a food is, if all I can tell you is that it's a wonderful food and there's nothing else, then you get that much space. If there's a wonderful story to go with it, you get that much space. Yeah. And that's because those are the kinds of stories people really want to read.
And how do you feel about all these wonderful agrarian writers suddenly?
Well, it depends on who they are, doesn't it?
Oh. If you think I'm going to let you off the hook with just stopping there.
I think there are some marvelous writers, and it's wonderful that food is becoming literary as well as something to eat, because it's been a long, long time since people have thought of it that way. I don't want to, there's somebody here in the audience who probably could tell me exactly when was the last time before this and we thought of somebody as a literary writer who wrote about food. There have been many people in the past, but there are a lot of people writing in different ways now. Most of those writings were sort of romantic, or they took you to another place and descriptions of the food itself. Today, people are writing about much more difficult things in a way. They're writing about the safety of food. They're writing about how food gets to your table. They're writing about what people are doing to food. I always get a little bit worried when I hear people talking about technology, because I'm always afraid they're talking about bioengineering something. And I don't really want to eat any bioengineered food. But, and I think that it's great that this is the kind of thing that has made a number of bestsellers, because people are so interested. Some of it's about food safety, and a lot of people are interested in that. But some of it is just about what's happened to American food, or how we lost our way. And I think some of those stories are wonderful to tell, and wonderful reminders for people of how far we have not come. There are other people who have been writing recently about how they've eaten locally by putting themselves on very strict diets, and they're not going to eat anything more than 100 miles, grown more than 100 miles away from where they live. And some of them are plain silly. Some of them are sort of self-congratulatory in a way that is rather annoying when, for instance, most of us go out to work. If you stay at home and you work at home, or you write at home, and you can go out and tend the garden all the time. That's great, but that doesn't work awfully well for other people. And if people think that that's what they're expected to do, they're going to get really turned off by this whole concept, rather than thinking, well, maybe I could have a little tomato plant here or there, and maybe I can buy the rest of the stuff from some local farmer and leave the farming to them.
So, I mean, her work is so appealing and so wonderfully written. I've begun calling her Barbara Screensaver.
I didn't
Do you know
mention
who I
any
did? No, I'm
names
just,
here.
and I guess I should let Andreas, the fellows respond if there's a comment that they want to throw in here. Andreas?
Well, I think that technology is an important thing, but I also think that a factor that we might be lacking because the circle has been broken is time. I mean, one of the reasons why we have a lot of different varieties was that they used to be grown, on this hillside you'd have these vines and these tomatoes, and you'd have potatoes growing in clay soil, and on the west side of and you would have to grow some potatoes on the north side as well, and they would be small, but they would have a particular flavor. I think that we need to also use another approach. I've met, one thing is also to create a link between agriculture and cooking, which is very important, but also in a way, agriculture as a system has been become so industrialized that many of the things that I've been growing, some of them that I've been growing for years, I have been recommended not to grow them because they are not viable. But they, I even on my farm in Norway, I have some fabulous peaches some years, and next year I have nothing, or two small ones that are quite sour. But I mean, those years when you do have it, those times when you manage to get something which is low yield and uneven, but with a flavor that is so special, is I mean, we need to be reminded of these things as well. My farm in South Africa is at the foot of I have two small houses, and there's a small dam. I'm surrounded by an orchard and vines. So I have like Pinot on one side and Sauvignon Blanc on the other. And right in front of me is a mountain, which is part of a wildlife area. And there were many fires that first year when I was in South Africa. And the next time I was back, one of these areas that had been affected by the fires, I saw a flower. And I was taken, I was shown around by a local guy who's very interested in biodiversity. And he showed me a flower that was a gladiola overbergensis. And no one had seen it since 1926. And because of that fire, and I think that that is a very extreme case, and we can't base our agriculture, of course, on those kind of things. But I mean, the fact that some things are unique and fantastic, low yielding, you can't plan for it, but you can hope for it. I think that is also, the factor of time and hope, and getting those two things into the cooking. And of course, you need the staples and you need whatever to survive. But you should have a factor, a part of it should be hope and time.
The one of my favorite questions, and I'm going to let us all talk to each other over produce and wine, because Pete Mondavi has been a great supporter of this series and has sent us a little Sauvignon Blanc to have with our farm bread in the other room. But I love this one. I used to knit until I learned that knitting a sweater cost more than buying one. That's my favorite thing ever.
That's not the point, is it?
Well, say that into the microphone.
No, that's not the point.
But I think there's one reoccurring that we deal with, is that sustainability, local,
Biodynamic,
biological, wine, food. There has to be margin. I mean, we have to be able to do these things in a way that it makes sense and that there's profit and margin, because that's what allows the experience to proliferate. And I think it's important that everything, in our case, in the restaurants at least, is done for the ultimate goal of impacting and creating the best experience on the plate for the customer. So not sustainability or local for the sake of it, but for the ultimate goal of creating the ultimate experience to the customer in the plate. And I think that creates the cycle. If you have margin, if you're creating quality within the cycle of sustainability, it works, it will proliferate itself, and then it will trickle through to all elements of our society.
And so as Dan said, it is a balance, isn't it? It is a balance.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue with Joe Bastianich.
All right. Well,
but the garlic that you talked about,
Yeah.
I mean, that is not, you can't sit down with the consultant and you will not find a consultant who will tell you to grow this garlic. But when you have this garlic and you serve it to people and they have what they feel is an experience of a lifetime, it does something. It helps
Well,
you
it gets
create
people
that.
to consider things other than price. And in the big food chain, and the big garlic food chain, from seed to farmer to trucker to distributor to marketplace, price is the determining factor throughout it. And so here's an example of a garlic that does taste better. There's demonstratively, unquestionably, but it tastes a hell of a lot better because you're getting people to consider something other than price, which I think is story.
all right. Let's thank the panel. And I'll just let Andreas know that what a consultant you can hire to do will tell you is how to find these people so that they can tell you where the good garlic is. Please join us. Next year, we're going to have 3 panels. I believe one of them will be about the power of the pen, and we will talk about the great importance of editors as collaborators. Oh, my goodness, there are some still. We will also talk about the importance of water in what we eat, drink, and live in. And I believe we will talk about emerging and disappearing foodways. Please join us inside. The panel will join you as well. Ask them all kinds of these impolite, lovely questions. Thanks.